Do you guys in this sort of slumber party feel of this? Matt and David, do you guys like jump in here? Like let's expand out the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I like the word praxis a lot. I think that that's a very
Define it
important.
for people. You know, there's always people
I mean,
watching that
the
don't
simplest way
necessarily
to,
know these things.
it's like theory in action, right? It's taking concepts and enacting them, and it's sort of the challenge of actually doing any kind of like real theory.
Can we make it like really, really simple? Like I read an article, some blog post about like I'm going to the batting yards at Hudson Yards, and I read a post somewhere that's like if I take one step back, you know, or whatever, if I hold the bat further over my shoulder and I connect it at this point, that's a better swing. So I'm going to go down to the yards and test out that theory. Is it with like just to make it really simple?
Yeah, no, I think
Praxis.
that's a part of it, and two, also, I think like the theory part would also be like the way, um, the way that you're swinging in itself, like conceptualizing like the motion in itself is an important part too. I mean, it's like
I love diagrams. I just wrote a diagram.
Perfect.
Okay.
So
here we go.
So this is what we do with groups sometimes. So you start with your theory, and theory doesn't need to be some intensely academic intellectual theory. Your theory could be something like, we have a group, we're going to bring Michael Brooks to come speak at our event. And if we bring Michael Brooks and we put out flyers at this and that place, and we get these, groups to co-sponsor it, we'll get 100 people, and 50 of those people are going to sign up on our list, and 20 of them are going to come to our next meeting, and 3 of them are going to stay engaged, right? So that's a theory of bringing Michael Brooks to come speak for the sake of recruitment, right? So you have goals attached to that theory, right? Yep. Then you do the thing, Michael comes speaks, and let's say twice as many people come, but half as many people sign up, right? Then you have to reflect. You have to actually have a meeting to debrief it and say what went well, what didn't go well. And the only way you can reflect objectively is if you had goals that you can evaluate against, right? So if your reflection is, was it good or not good? Some people will be like, yeah, I loved Michael's speech. Nah, it didn't really get me or whatever. But if you say, everyone would love it.
There's some holes in this.
But if your goal is to recruit a certain number of people and have a certain amount of those people come, then you can say, well, a ton of people came and loved it, but not enough people signed up, which means we didn't do enough pitching about our organization and why people need to come. We need to have more people with clipboards next time. Mm-hmm. So then that revises your theory. The next time your theory is we're going to have, Griscom come and speak, and we're going to have twice as many clipboards, and we're going to advertise in this and that place. Then you do the action differently as a result. So this is a cycle that's spinning where it's a way for you to be a student of your context, but it requires having clear goals that you're evaluating against, a time to actually reflect. And this is the thing about this moment of crisis that's useful to emphasize for activists, is if you're always in crisis response mode, where this is the dialectic you were talking about. If you're always doing, and not reflecting, then you're going to keep reproducing the same actions. And that's the trap the left has been in many regards. And so this is just nothing more than being a student of your context. But the other key that's worth emphasizing for folks who are trying to organize is most organizers have this cycle going on in our heads all the time. But if we don't do this with our whole group, right? If it's not like involving the rank and file membership of an organization, you're not actually building leadership, you're not doing political education, and you're not like supporting folks to learn how to self-govern and manage their own work. And you're really, then you're tuning into like, you're becoming all of the problems that are with the nonprofit industrial complex or the professionalization of activism. So I could go. I do whole workshops on this.
I'll have something to add to that in a second. But Griscom, I interrupted you. I just want us to try to be mindful of defining terms. But please finish what you were saying.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was just saying that I think that praxis is something that's very, very important, because I think that there's a tension that we've been seeing. I'll talk specifically about like, DSA and people who identify themselves as like socialists, or people use the word, leftist or whatever, between, I'm reading theory, like specifically like going back and like doing some of the work of like, Marx, or even reading like Laclau or Zizek, these kind of ideas. And then there's people who do that, and then they are just completely separate from action. And I think that that's something, especially people around, universities, like, I come from the philosophy department, that's what I studied at university. That's a huge divide, right? Between the people who are out there, doing organizing and doing events and being engaged in political organizations, and then people, spending all of their time trying to argue about finer points of theory. And I think that in this country specifically, we have a real tension when it comes to realizing that, sometimes spending time with the text actually can have value and benefit for you down the road. Look, trust me, like, I understand the tendency too, but it's like, the kind of fixation that, like, the only way to learn anything has to be, direct, hands-on. I think that we're learning a lot right now in the US on the left. It's very exciting that we have a kind of like growing left movement here, but we're learning a lot, I think, about the kind of like structural difficulties, for example, of like running campaigns within the Democratic Party. We're learning a lot about, the media bias and how powerful of an engine that is. We're learning a lot about ideology. And I think that, it's very important that we don't retreat back into this kind of like marginal, like, left that just sits around reading and has good groups and nice conversations,
We're not doing coffee shop shit here.
Yeah.
But I think,
yeah,
I just want to underline, because well, actually, I mean, we don't have to be that mindful of the time, but I just want to underline, like, in the introduction to class notes and in the post game for patrons, we're going to be doing some readings. Adolf Reed. Yes, there we go. Yes, right there. His critique of like every single modern tendency in the left, from like sub-Marxist pockets to identitarian, like, he's just nailing it. He's nailing it. He's just hitting, like, again and again and again. He sees things crystal clear. And what you realize when you're reading it, and this goes to what you're saying, Griscom, is it's like, if you don't, and Reed is a super clear writer, and folks can read and understand, and it's another thing to be balanced about, is you don't, this academicization of what should be like really broad and common discourses is also a problem. But like, if you haven't read that introduction, you're almost certainly going to replicate a lot of mistakes that are a product of a historical moment before a lot of us were born, that just help contextualize. And so, there is that, push and pull, and actually thinking and getting grounded in where we're at is really important. And also, what Joshua is also pointing to, among other things, is some people are allergic to the word spiritual. I don't care. Whatever word you want. There's going to be some like inner capacity building that is going to also need to be part of the mix too. Anyways, but yeah, just take it from there, guys. I just wanted to kind of bring stuff together a bit.
Let me just piggyback on your. Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hear you.
Oh, great. On your emphasis with class notes, because it's part of my quarantine reading list, and one of the things that's so helpful about it for me is to see what were the conditions that gave rise to different left currents at different points in the last 50 or so years, and then how have they mixed and commingled into our current landscape. And it helps me actually have compassion for people who exhibit some of the toxic tendencies of the left. My organization, the Wildfire Project, we are a counter-hegemonic project that is focused on shifting the culture of the left. And even us, with all of our whatever, we try to have a lot of compassion. Sometimes we just get mad frustrated with like how self-marginalizing and insular the left can be. And actually, the way that Adolf Reed charts these lineages helps us understand, at least, where these ideas came from. And they came from political conditions that are no longer the case. And it can both help us understand that, like, actually, some of these ways of thinking made sense given a certain kind of deprivation of like post Cold War, you know, like the death of the left in the US. And you can then lean into it and say, oh, we don't need some of these politics anymore because we're actually in a resurgence and in really fluid, chaotic conditions that give us plenty of opportunities. And it lets us not need to stay attached to the limitations of the left and actually kind of forgive the left for its own bullshits and say, okay, I understand where this came from. Also, we're in a different moment. Let's let it go. And I think that's what I want to take from Adolph Reed into my own organizational work and supporting groups to let go of some of these tendencies.
Joshua, you'll be talking with us again really soon. And I will say, you know, sometimes for patrons, we did a 2-part training course for Comrade and above patrons, which was super informative that Joshua did with us. And we're going to do another one of those things again soon. And also he will be back on the show many times, both during our isolation time and also post-isolation, which I think all of us are getting pretty hungry for. But Joshua, before you go, is there anything you'd like to leave us with? And as always, I just appreciate you, brother. I really do.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I mean, I just really appreciate you guys. I appreciate your rigor and your clarity and your levity and just like the way that you have fun and are serious. It's exactly the balance we need to strike. And would love to encourage folks to check out wildfireproject.org. If you want to hit us with wildfireproject.org/donate, we'd be grateful. And to just, if you are someone who's stuck at home and you're into this notion of, again, empowered apocalypticism is understanding that old worlds are dying and new worlds are being born constantly. There is part of my reading list right now is a book on climate change called We're Doomed, Now What? And, you know, I don't agree with all of it, but it's certainly stimulating. There's also a book that I helped write called Beautiful Trouble, which is a thick ass tactical manual for organizers. And it's super creative. There were 138 of us that wrote it together. And then the other piece, I think there's a lot of wisdom within the climate justice movement right now for this particular moment, because we've been dealing with the context of what happens we've been dealing with the context of systems collapse. And so there's a lot of really useful thinking. And 12 years ago, I helped write an organizing manual called Organizing Cools the Planet. And it feels in this moment perhaps useful for folks who are looking for an anchor through the chaos. But I'm just so grateful to be on with you all. And actually, okay, let me give one more. I know this is a lot of reading, but maybe folks will have some time. The other book
they should listen to. Damn, come on.
Yeah, okay, I'll give an album too.
Right.
But the last book is called Hegemony How To, A Roadmap for Radicals. This is my homie Matthew Smucker, who's also on the Wildfire Project board. And it's about getting out of the subcultural left into mass movements.
And of course this, please read Mass Notes, everybody.
Read it and then listen to Chronics. Listen to Chronics.
If ever there was a time for people to finally wake up and listen to Chronics, I have no idea why people have been lagging. Chronics is good. Chronics is life.
That's
and also
right.
Kofi too.
And John 9. John 9.
John 9.
Here,
Can you show a John 9 record?
Yeah. Here's one that she is if you're one of these people who is going on the like stress cycle of social media news feeds right now and you need something to like calm your fucking nervous system, John 9 is the person to listen to and just tune into what's not changing. The sunset right next to me, that's not changing. We'll make it through. Yeah, thanks y'all.
Joshua Kahn Russell, love you, man. Thank you so much.
See you, Joshua.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.